Good evening and thanks very much for joining us. I'm Brittany Ramsey. As wildfires continue to burn across the Northwest, Premier Doug Ford paid a visit to Thunder Bay today. He met with evacuees from Deer Lake First Nation as well as emergency management officials. But despite continued calls from Anishinaabe Nation for a state of emergency declaration, the Premier continues to insist it's not necessary. Ryan Bonazzo has more.
Premier Doug Ford says he felt it was important for him to personally check in with some of the 680 evacuees staying in Thunder Bay. He did that on Wednesday morning.
They were quite happy how they're being treated, and that's why I'm here. I want to hear firsthand from the people to make sure they're being taken care of.
But if they were hoping to hear the Premier change course and declare a province-wide state of emergency, that didn't happen. Ford continues to insist that an emergency order for northwestern Ontario, which allows the government to clear roads and property to facilitate additional evacuations, is enough.
It's not holding back any resources. We will put all the resources we have. I won't spare a penny. We'll make sure we're there to support the people of northwestern Ontario.
But Anishinaabe Nation Grand Chief Alvin Fiddler isn't satisfied.
I think we've been very clear.
NAN has been pushing the province for more than 2 weeks to declare a state of emergency, saying it will allow the government to dedicate more resources to ensure evacuees aren't just shipped to other municipalities, but properly supported once they're there. Nearly 3,200 people from 5 communities have been evacuated so far, but NAN believes that number could balloon to 6,000 if the weather doesn't start to cooperate.
When you're dealing with an emergency of this scale, it needs to be all hands on deck, that it has to be everyone coming on board and working from the same page, that we cannot just fight amongst ourselves in terms of what constitutes an emergency.
Indigenous Affairs Minister Greg Rickford acknowledges the challenges of finding adequate space here in the Northwest.
There are capacity limits to certain towns and cities across because the evacuees may put pressures on some of the health and social services of those communities. But so far, overall, given the magnitude and scope of this evacuation, we believe it has gone well.
Ford adds there's also plenty of room in the GTA if evacuees are willing to travel that far. But the Independent First Nations Alliance wants senior levels of government to establish a large evacuation center here in the Northwest.
We need to have First Nations take care of First Nations.
NAN has developed its own emergency response plan, which was presented to the Premier during his visit. It calls for, among other things, a tripartite agreement between the federal and provincial governments and First Nations that establishes clear roles and responsibilities in the event of an emergency.
I'll be running through that and implementing as much as we can. But I appreciate them doing that.
Ryan Bonazzo, TBT News.
Meanwhile, at a time when some members of the Poplar Hill First Nation are returning home due to substandard living conditions at their evacuation site, the fire threatening their community remains a concern. MNRF officials say Red Lake Fire 65 remains 6 kilometers from Poplar Hill First Nation, and it has grown by nearly 750 hectares over the past 24 hours. Elsewhere, the little amount of rain in the region has not helped ministry crews. 26 new fires were announced Wednesday, bringing the total active number in the Northwest region to 156. And as Fire Information Officer Jonathan Scott tells us, it sometimes brings more harm than it does help.
Really dependent on how much rain we get with this system that's kind of moving through the region at this time and where it lands and how much we get. So that's kind of a similar trend that we've been seeing. Also with that, as it stands now, the system that has moved through has had lightning in certain areas. So if we don't get substantial amounts of rain, there will be more lightning caused fires.
Scott says that in order to really change the fire hazard in the region, at least 10 millimeters of rain is needed. Thunder Bay Police have released an update on the investigation into the death of a man whose body was found near Lakehead University last weekend. Police say a postmortem has concluded and that the death is now a private family matter. Police will be taking no further action in the case. Meanwhile, an investigation continues after a body was discovered in the Nebing River near Arthur Street West Tuesday afternoon. Emergency crews were called around 3:30 p.m. after a 911 call alerted them to a body that was seen floating in the river. First responders managed to get the body to shore and determined the man was deceased. The area remained cordoned off this morning, and a drone was seen circulating the area. The Major Crimes Unit is now investigating, and a postmortem is pending. It's the second time in 2 days a dead body has been recovered from the waters around Thunder Bay. A middle-aged man was found in the marina on Monday night. Efforts to resuscitate him were unsuccessful. That investigation is also being handled by the Major Crimes Unit. Well, it's official. Local lawyer Chantel Bryson has accepted the federal NDP nomination in Thunder Bay Superior North. Bryson was acclaimed by the party Tuesday night. Born in London, Ontario, she's spent nearly 20 years in Thunder Bay. She hopes to unseat Liberal incumbent Health Minister Patty Hajdu, who's held the seat since 2015. Bryson represented the Feathers of Hope Indigenous Youth Group during the 7 Youth Inquest in the city 6 years ago. She plans to continue to advocate for Indigenous rights if she is elected.
I've spent probably 25 years fighting for equality in public services for First Nation communities, right? This debate needs to end. The attempt to starve out these communities on some dream of assimilation and these communities closing down needs to end. We are harming children with grossly underfunded education, housing, and healthcare. It's cruel and it needs to end. We need to support.
Now, Bryson didn't pull any punches when speaking about her Liberal rival. She calls Patty Hajdu a puppet of Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and accuses that government of hurting rather than helping the push for reconciliation in this country. Ontario Premier Doug Ford says a comprehensive back-to-school plan will be released early next week. Meanwhile, more than 300,000 unvaccinated students in Ontario will be facing a different set of rules when they head back to the class in September. Colin DeMello reports.
As Ontario schools prepare to reopen in September, families are facing a new pandemic policy. Ontario's Chief Medical Officer of Health revealed that vaccinated and unvaccinated students will be treated very differently in September if they've been exposed to someone with COVID-19.
If you are not immunized and you've been in contact with a high-risk contact, you'll be off for a minimum of 10 days. You'll have to get 2 tests, one initially and then another around day 7. If that test at day 7 is positive, you're off for another 10 days. And you can see that that is a potential for up to 20 days from school.
There are currently 330,000 eligible students who have yet to receive a single dose of the vaccine. And yesterday, just 3,100 people in that age bracket sat down for their first shot. Infectious disease specialists suggest there should be some other limitations as well for those who choose to be unvaccinated.
We can think about different settings where vaccinated children would be allowed, where unvaccinated children would probably have fewer opportunities. And you know, those are probably in, you know, extracurricular sports settings.
But school boards are unsure about how the vaccine requirement would be implemented, and they're uncertain about whether they can even ask about a student's status.
We can ask students, and we do ask students when they're coming into our schools and registering for the first time, have you had measles, mumps, rubella, all of those, tetanus, all of those kinds of vaccinations. There is legislation around that we are allowed to ask them those questions. But right now with the COVID vaccine, I'm not sure what the legalities are around asking about vaccines. Those are other questions that we're going to need answers to.
Putting more pressure on the province to reveal its back-to-school plan.
And with COVID-19 cases essentially stable and the vaccine rollout well underway, the Ontario government today turned its focus to clearing up the backlog of patients waiting for surgery.
So that we can make sure that whatever it is they need, whether it's a hip or knee replacement or cataract surgery, whatever it is, that they will get that in a timely manner.
Health Minister Christine Elliott announced an investment of up to $324 million to allow hospitals to perform more surgeries, MRIs, and CT scans and procedures. The province hopes to perform up to 67,000 additional surgeries and procedures to address long wait times. OPP in Fort Frances say they have a suspect in custody following a serious assault. It happened Tuesday afternoon at a downtown business. Police and ambulance personnel arrived to find a 20-year-old victim who had been assaulted with a weapon. The victim had to be transported to hospital in Toronto with what are described as life-threatening injuries. Police say a 38-year-old Fort Francis woman has been arrested in connection with the case and charged with aggravated assault. Work has begun on the leveling of the former Thunder Bay generating station on Mission Island. Crews from Budget Demolition are in the early stages of the project, which isn't expected to be completed until 2024. Corey Nordstrom reports.
Budget Demolition took ownership of the former OPG generating station in April and are now on site working towards a goal of clearing the almost 60-year-old power plant in 2 to 3 years. Site manager Jeremy Later says they've been tearing down the buildings outside of the main powerhouse and are removing parts of its interior before starting on the larger pieces of the structure later in the year.
We plan on doing some explosive demolition as well. First of all would be the stack. That's hopefully around September if it all goes well. And then part of the powerhouse will be December, and then the rest of the powerhouse next year, probably in the spring or summer.
A majority of the building material is steel, copper, and aluminum, which the company plans to recycle between 95 and 98% of. Currently, Budget Demolition is operating at its busiest stage with 30 employees and 7 excavators on site, but will need more local help going forward.
We brought a lot of our crew up from Hamilton. We're a Hamilton-based company. We brought them up to get the job started, but we're always looking for employees that are local, and we'll just fit them into the right spot as we need.
Prior to the sale of the 54-acre site, the city of Thunder Bay had been lobbying its former owners to find a way of retooling the generating station for other industrial purposes. With Budget Demolition at the helm, the goal is still the same, and they've generated interest from some potential suitors.
We're just working with those people that inquired and also with the city of Thunder Bay to see what we can do best for this property in the future use. But right now, there's nothing definite right now.
Corey Nordstrom, TBT News.
A public input booth was put up at a busy North Core intersection today. It was there to provide information and gather feedback from the public on a proposal to revitalize the area around Red River Road and Cumberland Street. With sewers and water mains in the North Core slated for replacement, promoters of the plan say it's an ideal time to reimagine how the area can be used. Key elements including prioritizing pedestrians, creating more outdoor seating, moving parking spots from Red River to side streets, and connecting to the waterfront. Project lead Guy Walters says they're working to finalize a budget before presenting the plan to council and hope to get funding from the provincial and federal governments. Walters says so far they've received a lot of positive feedback and support.
We're going to have double the amount of boulevards and sidewalks on Red River. It's going to be predominantly and most likely after we go through all of the engagement, but it'll be curbless street. So it'll be a very flexible street to accommodate closures, one-way traffic, two-way traffic, events, festivals, both winter and summer.
We really want to see a design that's driven by the public and really echo what the city and the people of the city wants. You know, we're a very dynamic, wide variety of cultures in Thunder Bay, and we really want to see a space that everybody feels comfortable using.
A few pilot projects are already being implemented in the North Core area, including pop-up patios and traffic calming measures. Walker says reconstruction of Court Street from Wilson to Park will begin in spring of 2022.
Well, Fiona, the good news is we got some much needed rain today. The bad news is